I have this really crystal clear memory. It's from my early 20s. I just moved into my first, well, truly bad apartment, the kind with those flickering fluorescent lights in the kitchen and neighbors you only ever heard, never actually saw. And I thought, right, this is it. I'm finally free.
Yeah.
No parents checking in, no curfew, just me, my rules. But this new freedom, it felt weirdly suffocating, like heavy.
Oh, interesting. How so?
It was just this constant, like low-grade dread. Every single time an unexpected bill showed up in the mail or my really old car made some new, horrible, expensive-sounding noise, my stomach would just completely drop.
Yeah, that external pressure.
Exactly. It felt like life had turned into this relentless series of ambushes, problems I never asked for, never signed up for. And my whole strategy, pure defense, avoidance, basically.
Right, hiding from it.
Totally. I'd put off making the hard phone calls, let the scary-looking mail pile up unopened, just escape into video games or going out with friends. Anything but face it. I think if I could just run from all these demands, dodge fast enough, I'd finally feel like I was the one steering the ship, like I was in charge.
Just trying to regain control by avoiding.
Yeah. But a really bizarre thing happened. The more I ran, the more I felt like a pinball, just getting slammed constantly from one bumper to the next. That control I thought I was chasing by avoiding all the hard stuff. That was the very thing making me feel completely, utterly out of control. It backfired completely.
That's a powerful image, the pinball.
Okay, so let's unpack this. That feeling, that pinball feeling, constantly just reacting to life's endless kind of passive demands, that's the exact tension we're going to dive into today.
Right.
Our mission here is to really understand the huge psychological difference between those things that just happen to you, those low-grade inflicted stressors like the bills, the broken car, and the active challenges, the things you voluntarily choose to take on.
Like training for a marathon, maybe? Or learning a really complex new skill.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Something deliberately hard. We're going to look at the mechanism that seems to completely flip that script, how choosing difficulty, choosing the hard thing, actually builds the internal strength you need to handle all the inevitable chaos you didn't choose.
And if we connect this to that bigger picture, your experience feeling ambushed like that, it perfectly illustrates this core human quest for agency. For control.
Agency.
When the external world feels random or aggressive, it really chips away at your sense of, well, personal causation. Like you're not the cause of things in your own life.
Right. Things are just happening to you.
Precisely. So the goal of this deep dive is to show you how to intentionally cultivate what we sometimes call an internal fortress. And like this isn't just, fluffy self-help talk.
Oh, definitely not.
It's about building a specific structure. It's built from two really critical psychological resources, self-efficacy and locus of control. Think of these like the bricks and mortar of this fortress. They act as this dynamic internal shield, letting you not just withstand external stressors, but actually absorb them, maybe even grow from them.
That idea, the internal fortress, it makes a lot more sense when you see it in action. I remember reading about Alara. She was this mid-level manager, right? And her life had become pure defense mode, just drowning.
Drowning in what, specifically?
In those passive demands.
Yeah.
Caring for an elderly parent, navigating really complex school stuff for her son.
Yeah.
Everything felt like it was just being inflicted on her. Constant reaction.
Okay, so very similar to the pinball feeling.
Exactly. Then she did something kind of nuts. She signed up for a 100-mile cycling event, a century ride, 6 months out.
Wow, okay, that's a big leap.
Huge leap. And this was a purely active challenge, right? Totally self-imposed, completely separate from all the overwhelming stuff in her life. And she actually said that the structure of the training, the measurable physical pain, tracking the metrics, it was the only area of her life where she felt she had total conscious control.
Ah, the control aspect again.
Right. And when she finally crossed that finish line, exhausted, probably your external problems, the parent, the school stuff, they hadn't magically vanished. But something inside her had fundamentally shifted.
Her internal wiring, as you put it.
Yeah. She had this undeniable internal proof that she could achieve something seemingly impossible. And that shifted her entire perception of control, her locus of control. It's fascinating, right? What exactly is that shift?
Well, what Alara experienced there was a massive surge in something called self-efficacy. This is a really foundational concept developed by Albert Bandura back in 1977.
Bandura, right?
Yeah.
Heard the name.
Yeah, very influential. Self-efficacy basically is defined as an individual's belief in their capacity to successfully perform a given task or achieve a specific outcome.
Okay, belief and capacity. not just general confidence.
Exactly. It's crucial to immediately distinguish this from self-esteem. Self-esteem is more of a global judgment of your self-worth, like, I am a good person. That's an overall assessment.
Yeah.
Self-efficacy is highly task-specific. It's, I believe I can master this new software, or like Alara, I believe I can actually finish this 100-mile ride. It's a belief in capability for a certain thing, not your inherent value as a person.
Got it. So efficacy is practical, it's actionable. Self-esteem is more emotional, maybe?
Yeah.
More general. Why is that distinction so important for building this internal fortress?
Because efficacy is a major, measurable mediator of your behavior. Bandura showed it influences 3 key things. First, the course of action you choose to pursue, what goals you even set for yourself.
Right. Do you even try?
Exactly. Second, the amount of effort you put in when you do try. And third, maybe most importantly, your resilience. Your persistence when you inevitably face obstacles or setbacks. If you genuinely believe you can do it, that's high efficacy. You simply try harder and for longer, even if you fail at first.
Okay, let's bring it back to that person feeling like a pinball, just reacting all the time.
Yeah.
How does having high versus low self-efficacy change how you psychologically respond to all that incoming stress?
Oh, the contrast is stark, really stark. Individuals with high self-efficacy tend to look at difficult tasks, even unexpected ones, as challenges to be mastered. Think Alara and her cycling training. They see it as something to figure out, not a threat to be avoided.
Okay, challenge mindset versus threat mindset.
Precisely. And when they do encounter failure, which everyone does, they recover much more quickly. They tend to attribute the setback to something like insufficient preparation or maybe some changeable external factors rather than some fundamental flaw in themselves.
I didn't study enough, not I'm stupid.
Exactly. And really importantly, this mindset, this core belief that they can generally control or at least manage threatening situations, is consistently linked in the research to lower overall stress levels and significantly less vulnerability to things like depression.
Okay, so high efficacy is protective.
Yeah.
And the low self-efficacy mindset, that's basically the psychological engine driving that feeling of being totally out of control, the pinball effect.
That's a perfect way to put it. Low self-efficacy is like a gateway to what psychologists call learned helplessness. The person starts perceiving tasks as monumentally more difficult than they actually are.
Everything feels impossible.
Right, which naturally leads to poorer performance, more tension, more anxiety, and it can spiral down towards depression. Instead of attributing failure to something controllable, like I didn't put in enough effort, they tend to blame it on innate, permanent low ability. I'm just not good at this stuff.
And they genuinely believe that no amount of effort they exert will actually make a difference to the outcome.
That's the core of learned helplessness. It's the definition of feeling like control is purely external. Nothing I do matters.
So, okay, pulling this together. The very act of choosing an active challenge, like Alara's bike ride, is essentially a strategy. It's a way to actively shift your locus of control. You move it from external, blaming fate, chance, difficult bosses, to internal. You start believing that your actions, your effort, actually shape your reality.
Yes. That shift from external attribution, it's the world's fault, to internal attribution, my effort matters. That's the whole game. That's building the fortress.
And Alara's bike ride gave her, what was the term Bandura used?
An active mastery experience. That's the absolute cornerstone. It's undeniable, authentic evidence of your capability gained directly from actual performance. She didn't just think she was strong. She proved it to herself over 100 very real, very difficult miles.
It's proof, not just belief.
Exactly. And these mastery experiences are the strongest source of self-efficacy because they create this robust psychological anchor. It's something solid you can hold on to, something that can help you weather the inevitable temporary failures that come later on.
Okay, so mastery experiences are number one. But how else do we build this stuff? Because it feels like it's not just about succeeding all the time. There has to be more to it. Can you break down those 4 primary sources Bandura identified for acquiring self-efficacy beliefs?
Absolutely. So beyond the critical mastery experiences, the second source is vicarious experiences of social models.
Watching other people.
Basically, yes. Observing others succeed, particularly peers who you judge as being similar to yourself in some important way. Seeing them achieve a difficult goal raises your own expectation that you probably possess the necessary skills too. If they can do it, maybe I can too.
Okay, that makes sense. Monkey do, kind of.
In a way, yes. But here's where we need to be a bit cautious. The flip side is also true. Observing failures, especially among people you identify with, can actually undermine your motivation and your efficacy quite quickly.
But wait a second. If watching others is so powerful, how do you stop seeing other people fail from just totally tanking your own motivation? Especially if you're in a field, say, where there's a really high failure rate, like starting a business or something.
That's a really insightful question. It points to the nuance here. It's not just about watching anyone. The key is selecting the right kind of model to watch.
Okay.
You ideally want to focus on observing coping models, not just pure mastery models.
Coping models, what's the difference?
A mastery model is someone who makes it look easy. Maybe they're just naturally brilliant at it. Watching them can sometimes lower your efficacy because the task looks completely unattainable for you. I could never be that good.
Right. It's discouraging.
Exactly. But a coping model is someone who visibly struggled at first. Maybe they showed typical fears, they made mistakes, you saw them putting in the effort, and then they progressively improved and eventually succeeded.
So you see the struggle and the improvement.
Precisely. Watching a relatable peer struggle, persist through the difficulty, and finally succeed, that strengthens the belief that improvement is mostly a function of effort and strategy, not just some innate magical talent. It makes success feel achievable through work.
Wow, okay. That completely reframes things like mentorship or even just watching colleagues work. It's not about finding the superstar, necessarily. What's the third source?
The third source is social persuasion. This is basically direct encouragement. It's the coach, the mentor, the friend telling you, you can do this, I believe in you.
Pep talk.
The pep talk, exactly. Now, it can be helpful, especially for boosting your initial motivation to even try something. But Bandura found it's actually the weakest source of efficacy.
Really? Why? Seems like it would be powerful.
Because efficacy built purely on someone else's words is fragile. It's easily shattered by a single, concrete, disconfirming mastery experience. You can tell someone repeatedly they're a fantastic public speaker, but if they get up on stage and completely freeze, all that verbal encouragement evaporates in an instant. The reality of the failure overrides the words.
Actions speak louder than words, literally. Okay. And the fourth source, you mentioned this one is maybe the most subtle. It deals with how we interpret our own internal signals, right? That nervous energy we feel before something big.
Yes, and this one is perhaps the most directly relevant to managing that feeling of stress or being overwhelmed. Physiological and affective states. It's not about the physical response itself, the racing heart, the sweaty palms, but about how you interpret that response.
Okay, the story you tell yourself about the feeling.
Exactly. Imagine you're about to give a huge presentation. Your heart's pounding, your palms are sweating, maybe you feel a bit shaky. A person with high self-efficacy tends to interpret those physical feelings, that rush of adrenaline, as energizing, as preparatory. It's the body signaling it's ready for peak performance.
So they feel the butterflies in their stomach.
Yeah.
But they see it not as fear, but as fuel, like getting ready for action.
That's a great way to put it. Fuel, not fear. Conversely, an individual who's already steeped in self-doubt tends to view those exact same physiological signs, the shaking, the racing heart, as clear evidence of impending failure. As proof of that vulnerability or weakness, oh no, I'm falling apart.
Wow. Same physical signals, totally different meaning assigned.
The difference is purely cognitive reframing, and this is where active challenges become practice grounds. You use the voluntary stressor, the difficult task you chose, to practice interpreting that anxiety, that arousal, not as a signal to stop, but as a necessary component of high performance.
So when Alara was cycling up that insanely steep hill, feeling the pain,
she learned, probably implicitly, to read the burning in her legs, not as a sign to quit, but as a sign that her effort was nearing its threshold. It became confirmation of her capability, her efficacy in pushing through difficulty, rather than evidence she should give up.
Okay, so we've clearly established that taking on active challenges builds efficacy, especially through those really powerful mastery experiences. But let's be honest, tackling something huge and self-imposed like a massive project at work, or training for a marathon, it sounds. Well, frankly, like a recipe for pure exhaustion and pain.
Right, it sounds like a grind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What makes these deep, challenging mastery experiences not just bearable, but actually enjoyable? Or even something people actively chase? How do we get from just grinding through the pain to being, fully immersed and actually liking it?
That transition, that magic ingredient, is achieved through a state called flow. You might have heard it called being in the zone.
Yeah, in the zone, definitely.
Yeah. Flow is the psychological state where really intense concentration merges completely with a profound sense of enjoyment. It's the mental space where those mastery experiences we just talked about are most likely to happen, and it's what turns a potentially punishing task into something intrinsically rewarding. It's defined by this feeling of action and consciousness just melting together.
The term flow itself, though,
Yeah.
it sounds almost effortless, which seems kind of counterintuitive for something that requires such intense focus and effort, right?
That's because the experience itself feels effortless, even if the activity requires immense skill and concentration. The psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi coined the term back in the 1970s.
Okay.
He found that the people he interviewed, elite athletes, artists, surgeons, musicians, describing their peak performance moments, they consistently use this metaphor of a water current carrying them along. They'd say things like they felt like they were floating or being carried on by the flow of the activity itself.
So they weren't fighting the task.
No, they were moving with it,
No.
completely absorbed.
Okay, let's break down the actual architecture of this state. What are the core components? What actually defines the flow experience when it's happening?
Well, Csikszentmihalyi, along with Gene Nakamura, identified 6 key factors that are usually present. First, you absolutely need intense and focused concentration on the present moment. Everything else just fades away. All distractions disappear.
Laser focus.
Laser focus. Second, and this follows from the first, is a merging of action and awareness. You stop feeling like an observer watching yourself perform the action. You just are the action. Thinking and doing become one.
No separation.
Right. Third is a loss of self-consciousness. All those worries about what other people might be thinking, or even your own internal critical voice, they just quiet right down. You stop judging yourself.
That must be a huge relief, especially for someone maybe struggling with the self-doubt that comes with low efficacy.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a temporary psychological vacation from self-judgment. The fourth factor, and this is the most critical link back to our idea of the internal fortress, is a clear sense of personal control or agency over the activity and the situation. You feel like you're in command.
There's that control piece again. It's central.
It's absolutely central. This feeling of control is almost like the reward system within the flow state itself. Then the final 2 components are, fifth, a distortion of temporal experience time can feel like it speeds up dramatically or sometimes slows right down. Hours can feel like minutes.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that.
And finally, sixth, is the realization, often afterwards, that the activity was intrinsically rewarding. This is what's called an autotelic experience. You weren't doing the challenging activity just for some external reward or final result, like money or praise. You were doing it for the inherent satisfaction of the process itself. The doing was the reward.
Okay, so the key isn't just being busy or even working hard. It's about engaging in this very specific, balanced way. Which brings us to the central precondition for flow. This has got to be the most instructive part for actually finding it, right?
It really is the blueprint. Flow doesn't just happen randomly. It occurs only when there's a very precise balance between the perceived challenges of the task you're undertaking and your own perceived skills to meet those challenges.
Balance, okay.
And crucially, flow doesn't happen when things are easy. That's boredom. For flow to occur, both the challenge level and your skill level generally need to be perceived as higher than average for you personally.
Not just high challenge, not just high skill, but both high and matched.
Exactly. This relationship is best understood using what's called the 8-channel model, or sometimes the experience fluctuation model. It maps out different states based on this balance.
Okay, we definitely need to map out those channels for people listening. Show what happens psychologically when that balance is lost or found.
Right. Imagine a graph. Skill level is on one axis, maybe the vertical, and challenge level is on the other, the horizontal.
Okay.
The sweet spot, the quadrant where both your perceived skill and the perceived challenge are high, that is the flow channel.
Okay, high skill, high challenge equals flow. What about the other corners?
Let's look at the extremes. If the challenges are very high, but your skills feel low, you're not in flow, you enter anxiety. You feel overwhelmed, maybe panicked.
Right, the I can't handle this feel.
Exactly. Now flip it. If your skills are very high, but the challenges are low, what do you feel?
Boredom.
Boredom, precisely. You're capable, but the task is just tedious, unengaging. And the last corner, if both your skills and the challenges are low.
Yeah, apathy. Just not caring.
Apathy, total disengagement. You don't feel challenged, you don't feel competent, you just check out. Those are the 4 main corners. Flow, anxiety, boredom, apathy.
But life isn't always just those extremes. What about the states in between? What happens when there's a partial mismatch?
Yeah, the intermediate states are really crucial because they often show you the path back towards flow. For instance, if you have high skills but only moderate challenges, you feel a sense of control. It's comfortable, manageable, but maybe not fully immersive or exciting. You're not really stretching yourself.
Comfortable but not growing.
Right. Now, what if you face high challenges but have only moderate skills? You're in a state called arousal. This can feel intense, stimulating, maybe even exciting, but it's right on the edge of anxiety. You're pushing, but you might tip over if the challenge increases slightly or your skills falter.
Okay, arousal, like being alert, maybe a bit stressed, but still engaged.
Exactly. Then, if you have low skills but face moderate challenges, you feel worry. This is often paralyzing because you know you need to do something, but you doubt your ability. It's different from anxiety where the challenge feels insurmountable. Here, it just feels daunting.
Worry. Okay. And the last one, low challenges, but moderate skills.
That leads to relaxation. It's pleasant, comfortable, low stress. But again, you're not learning or growing much. You're coasting.
So mapping this back, that pinball feeling, being constantly overwhelmed by passive demands that just keep coming. Structurally, that sounds a lot like being stuck in the anxiety channel or maybe the worry channel on this map, doesn't it?
Psychologically, it's identical. The external world keeps presenting challenges that feel overwhelming. The debt, the broken car, the demanding boss, the sick parent. But you perceive your internal skills as inadequate to meet them. That leads to paralysis, avoidance, and that feeling of being out of control.
Right.
But the key insight, the really practical takeaway from the flow model, is this inherent growth principle it reveals. You always have two potential paths out of those non-flow states back towards flow.
Okay, what are they?
Simple but profound. If the challenges are too low for your skills, you're in boredom or relaxation, you must find ways to increase the challenge. Take on a harder task, set a higher goal, add complexity. You need to push yourself into the flow channel.
Seek out difficulty.
Seek appropriate difficulty. Conversely, if the challenges are too great for your current skills, you're in anxiety or worry, the path back to flow involves deliberately and diligently learning new skills. You need to build your capabilities until they match the challenge level. Increase skills to meet the challenge. Exactly. This constant dynamic adjustment, seeking challenges when bored, building skills when anxious, this striving is absolutely essential. It's how you stretch your abilities, reinforce your sense of competence, and ultimately build that rock-solid self-efficacy we talked about earlier. Flow demands growth.
That makes sense. The desire to constantly level up, pursue growth, find that flow state. It's clearly intrinsically rewarding, as you said. But let's shift focus a bit, maybe to a slightly darker or at least more manipulative psychological mechanism that's also at play here. It's about why we seem to place such an incredibly high value on the outcomes of these challenging experiences, even if, objectively speaking, the end result isn't that great. You know, think back to that classic example. You spend months sweating, swearing, building a piece of furniture from scratch. It ends up kind of wobbly. Maybe the finish is uneven.
Yeah, definitely not perfect.
Right. But you still end up loving that wobbly piece way more than some perfectly engineered, mass-produced thing you bought. Why? This is where the pain and struggle of the active challenge somehow twists into an unexpected, maybe even inflated, sense of reward. And it involves cognitive dissonance.
Yes, you're talking about effort justification. It's a really deeply ingrained human tendency. We tend to inflate the value, the desirability of outcomes that required significant effort, whether that effort was time, energy, pain, embarrassment, whatever, to achieve.
We convince ourselves it was worth it.
We basically look back at the sacrifice, the suffering, and we retroactively convince ourselves that the payoff must have been worth all that struggle. It's a way our brain resolves the mental discomfort that arises from holding conflicting beliefs. This is classic cognitive dissonance, a theory originally developed by Leon Festinger back in the 1950s.
Right. Dissonance, that uncomfortable clash in your head.
Yeah.
And the conflicting beliefs in this case are something like, wow, I invested a massive, maybe even painful amount of effort into this, versus, actually the outcome of all that effort is kind of disappointing.
Yeah.
Or just okay.
Correct. The brain absolutely hates holding those two contradictory thoughts simultaneously. It creates psychological tension. So to quickly and efficiently reduce that dissonance, we unconsciously modify the cognition that's easiest to change.
There she is.
Usually, it's our perception of the value of the outcome. It's easier to convince yourself the wobbly table is actually charming and unique, or that the difficult job is incredibly prestigious, than it is to admit you wasted a huge amount of effort.
So we inflate the outcome's value to match the effort invested.
Exactly. We rationalize the struggle. We tell ourselves that the ugly trophy, the incredibly demanding job, or that wobbly bookshelf is fundamentally better, more meaningful, or more valuable than it actually is, simply because of the high price we paid in effort to get it.
There's a classic study that proved this, right?
Mm-hmm.
The one involving the discussion group.
Yeah.
It's genuinely kind of shocking when you hear about it.
Oh, you mean the Aronson and Mills experiment from 1959? Yes, it's a cornerstone study because it's so perfectly isolated, this exact phenomenon.
Tell us about it.
Okay, so they recruited college women, telling them they were going to join a discussion group focused on the psychology of sex. But before they could join, they had to undergo an initiation process. There were 3 conditions.
Okay.
The control group had basically no initiation. A second group had a mild initiation where they had to read aloud some words related to sex that were, slightly awkward but not overly embarrassing.
All right. And the third group?
The third group underwent a severe initiation. These women were required to read aloud a list of extremely obscene, explicit words and detailed, vivid descriptions of sexual activity directly to a male experimenter.
Wow. Okay, so deliberately designed to be highly embarrassing and uncomfortable. Maximum psychological effort.
Exactly. The researchers wanted to maximize the perceived cost of joining this group. Now, after the initiation, all the participants listened to the exact same audio recording of the supposed first group discussion they were about to join.
And what was the discussion like?
It was intentionally designed by the experimenters to be incredibly mind-numbingly boring. Really dull, monotonous, full of jargon, completely uninteresting conversation about, the secondary sexual characteristics of lower animals. Just awful.
So objectively, a terrible discussion group.
Objectively terrible. Then, after listening, the women were asked to rate how interesting the discussion was, how much they liked the group members, and how much they wanted to continue participating.
And logically, everyone should have rated it poorly, right?
Yeah.
Especially given the topic.
Yeah. Rationally, yes. They all heard the same dull tape. But that is not what happened. The results were striking. The women who had endured the severe, embarrassing initiation rated the incredibly dull discussion, and the group members themselves significantly and disproportionately more favorably than the women who had undergone the mild initiation or no initiation at all.
They liked the boring group more because they suffered to get into it.
Precisely. They had to justify the extreme psychological effort and humiliation they'd just gone through. To resolve the dissonance between, I suffered for this and this is actually terrible, their minds unconsciously inflated the group's worth. It's powerful, direct proof of effort, justification in action. The suffering made the boring group seem valuable.
That is just fascinating and kind of disturbing. It really shows that the more we suffer or struggle for something, the more deeply we commit to valuing it, even when objective reality might suggest otherwise. But this mechanism, effort justification, while it seems helpful for getting us committed to active challenges, it must have some really serious downsides too, right? We need to be aware of those.
Oh, absolutely. We must acknowledge the dark side. While effort justification can be a powerful engine for commitment and persistence, it is also the psychological bedrock for the sunk cost fallacy.
Ah, the sunk cost fallacy. Heard of that one.
It's that disastrous tendency people have to keep pouring resources, time, money, emotional energy into a failing endeavor. Could be a failing business, a toxic relationship that's clearly not working, a doomed investment project. They keep going just because of the significant resources they've already invested.
They don't want the past effort to have been for nothing.
Exactly. You rationalize continuing the struggle to avoid the emotionally painful admission that the initial massive effort might have been a mistake or simply wasted. The past effort justifies future, potentially irrational effort.
So, if a Lara, our cyclist, after successfully completing her incredibly difficult 100-mile ride, then decided to pour her life savings into starting, say, an endurance cycling coaching business. But the business was clearly failing, losing money month after month. She might keep throwing money at it, relying on the memory of her own hard-won cycling success to justify it.
That's a perfect potential example. She'd be using the value derived from the suffering and success of the ride, the effort justification to potentially justify throwing good money after bad in the business venture, even if objective data screamed stop.
Okay.
Furthermore, this justification mechanism can also enable the justification of harmful behaviors. Think about severe hazing rituals in some groups, or why people sometimes stay in abusive or deeply unsatisfying dynamics.
They inflate the value of the group or the relationship.
Yes, to compensate for the pain, humiliation, or suffering endured to be part of it or to maintain it. It must be worth it if I went through all that. This mechanism can unfortunately entrench harmful, inefficient, or painful cycles in both our personal lives and even in organizational cultures.
And it makes it really hard to change course, doesn't it? To admit you were wrong or made a bad choice.
It severely compromises our ability to learn from mistakes and adapt. It creates a major hindrance to change. The more effort, pain, or time you've invested in something, the greater the internal psychological resistance you'll feel to admitting that the pursuit was misguided or that it's simply not working anymore.
You're locked in.
You can become locked in. It prevents people from cutting their losses and pivoting to new, potentially better opportunities, because doing so would implicitly mean acknowledging that the previous, often enormous effort was wasted. So the key message here really has to be vigilance. We need to consciously audit our commitments and investments, especially the difficult ones, to make sure the understandable pride in our effort doesn't blind us to the objective reality of the outcome. Is it really worth it, or am I just justifying the struggle?
Okay, right. So let's pivot now and really unpack this into practical, actionable steps. We've established that active challenges are crucial for building self-efficacy, right? That happens largely through getting into that intense, rewarding state of flow. And we also know our brains have this quirky tendency to reward us, maybe even overly reward us, for the effort involved through effort justification. So if we want to consciously build that internal fortress and really shift our locus of control away from feeling like that pinball, how do we systematically apply this? How do we craft and engage with these kinds of beneficial challenges in our everyday lives, both personally and, importantly, at work?
Yeah, the application is key. It really starts with being intentional about the strategies you use to build self-efficacy. You can't just randomly throw yourself at hard things. You need to strategically choose and structure your active challenges.
Okay, strategy number one.
The first principle, echoing the flow model, is to set moderately challenging goals. This is absolutely crucial. Think of it as the Goldilocks zone of challenge.
Not too easy, not too hard.
Exactly. If the goal is too easy, the master experience you get from achieving it is weak. It doesn't really build robust efficacy. Okay, I did that easy thing, so what? But if the goal is overwhelmingly hard, you risk repeated failure, which, as we discussed, can seriously undermine efficacy and just lead to anxiety or apathy. See, I knew I couldn't do it.
Right.
A strong, resilient sense of efficacy is really only forged by overcoming obstacles that require sustained effort and persistence, but that are ultimately seen as achievable. You need that successful mastery experience at the end of the struggle.
Okay, find the sweet spot of difficulty. How can we leverage that social element we talked about earlier, the vicarious experiences, watching others to structure how we learn or take on these challenges?
That's the second key strategy. When you're learning a new skill, especially one that feels intimidating or complex, you should intentionally seek out and observe coping models.
Right, the ones who struggled, not the superstars.
Exactly. As we discussed, observing someone who visibly struggled, maybe made obvious mistakes, looked frustrated, but then slowly figured it out and improved. That's far more beneficial for building your own efficacy than watching a flawless expert make it look effortless.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Let's say you're learning a complex foreign language. Instead of only watching videos of fluent native speakers having perfect conversations, maybe find a language exchange partner who's just, say, 2 chapters ahead of you in the textbook. Their visible struggle with grammar, their occasional frustration, it validates your own effort. It makes the journey seem navigable, not like some impossible mountain only naturals can climb. It proves that progress comes from persistence.
Got it. Seek out fellow strugglers who are slightly ahead.
Right.
What about feedback? When we're working on these challenging things and we get feedback, how should that feedback be delivered to really maximize the efficacy building effect? Not just tell us if we're right or wrong.
Yeah, feedback is critical, but the type of feedback matters immensely. First, it absolutely needs to be timely, ideally immediate. Second, it needs to be highly specific to the task, not just a general good job or needs work. And third, It should be focused on concrete improvement steps. It needs to provide essentially a map for success. Here's what you did well, here's the specific error, and here's exactly what you need to do differently next time.
Okay, specific and actionable.
But there's a deeper psychological distinction that's really crucial here. The research strongly recommends using self-referenced feedback whenever possible.
Self-referenced, what does that mean exactly?
It means comparing the individual's current performance only to their own previous performance. Look how much you've improved since last week. Or, you handled that specific step much better this time compared to your last attempt.
Okay, so why is that better than, say, comparing them to the top performers in the group, which is what happens all the time in work settings or school, right?
Yeah.
Rankings, leaderboards.
It's better because the goal is to build that sense of internal control and efficacy. When you use norm-referenced feedback, comparing someone to the top performer or the average, or ranking them, their perceived success becomes partly dependent on an outcome they cannot control, how well other people are doing.
Ah, right. If everyone else suddenly gets brilliant, my performance looks worse, even if I improved.
Exactly. And that can weaken efficacy because it disconnects effort from outcome. But self-reference comparison keeps the focus purely internal. It highlights their personal progress, their effort paying off, and their mastery of controllable learning goals. By making the yardstick internal, you continuously reinforce that fundamental belief: my effort shapes my reality.
That feels like a really critical takeaway for anyone managing people or teaching. Focus on personal bests, not just rankings. Okay, let's fully move this into the workplace now. Many people feel that passive demand dread most acutely at work, right? The endless inflicted meetings, the overflowing inbox, the bureaucratic tasks they didn't choose. How can we as employees introduce these vital active challenges into an environment that often feels so rigidly prescribed and out of our control?
This brings us directly to a really powerful concept called job crafting. It was coined by two researchers, Amy Rusnewski and Jane Dutton, back in 2001. Job crafting is essentially the self-directed process where employees proactively redefine and reshape various components of their own jobs, often without needing formal permission or waiting for management to initiate changes.
So it's taking control from the bottom up.
It's the ultimate act of asserting professional agency, yes. It's about making the job you have fit you better, rather than just passively accepting the job description as written.
Okay, so it's not about quitting and finding a whole new job necessarily. It's about tweaking the one you're in. What are the main ways people can do this? They identified 3 forms, right?
Yes, they outlined 3 primary forms focusing on where the reshaping happens. First, there's task crafting. This involves actively changing the number, the scope, or the type of tasks you perform in your job.
Like volunteering for a new, challenging project that interests you.
Exactly. Or maybe negotiating to offload a task that you find particularly draining or that doesn't use your strengths, perhaps swapping it with a colleague, or even just finding more efficient ways to do your existing tasks.
Okay, changing the what of the job. What's the second form?
Second is relational crafting. This is about changing the quality or the quantity of your interactions with other people at work.
So choosing who you work with more or less.
Precisely. It might mean actively seeking out interactions with colleagues you find energizing or from whom you can learn, maybe finding a mentor or becoming one. It could also mean consciously minimizing contact with individuals you find consistently draining or negative. It's about curating your work relationships.
Right, managing the who of the job. And the third form, you hinted this one might be the most psychological, tying back to things like meaning and maybe even cognitive dissonance.
That's right. The third form is cognitive crafting. This is perhaps the most internal form. It involves changing how you think about your job, changing the meaning you ascribe to the work you do.
Reframing it in your head.
Exactly. So instead of viewing your role as simply, say, processing insurance claims, you might reframe it as helping people recover financially after a crisis, or ensuring the company fulfills its promises to customers. This reframing injects a sense of purpose, significance, and maybe even control into work that might otherwise feel monotonous or meaningless. It changes the why of the job.
Wow. Task, relational, cognitive.
Yeah.
That's a powerful toolkit. It feels like job crafting is fundamentally about replacing that passive compliance, just doing what you're told, with active, self-directed choices and challenges.
That's exactly it. And further research has actually categorized these job crafting behaviors into 2 general modes: approach crafting and avoidance crafting.
Approach and avoidance.
Yeah. Approach crafting involves actively seeking out positive aspects at work, taking on new challenges that stretch your skills, building mastery, developing better relationships, finding novel learning opportunities. This directly builds efficacy through active engagement.
Okay, adding the good stuff.
Right. Avoidance crafting, on the other hand, involves taking self-directed actions to reduce or mitigate the negative aspects of work, like implementing a personal system to limit email checking to certain times, negotiating to reduce participation in meetings you feel are unproductive, or finding ways to buffer yourself from excessive demands.
Protecting yourself from the bad stuff.
Exactly. And organizations that really understand this link between agency, efficacy, and well-being need to foster an environment where employees feel they have the autonomy, the psychological safety, to engage in both types of crafting.
So allow people to see challenges and allow them to protect themselves from overload.
Precisely. Recognizing that approach crafting builds growth and efficacy through those active challenges, while avoidance crafting protects the employee from being overwhelmed by unnecessary passive demands. Giving employees this license to proactively shape their own work experience is probably the single most powerful way to foster professional agency, boost job satisfaction, enhance performance, and ultimately provide a robust antidote to workplace stress and burnout. It puts them back in the driver's seat.
You know, what's really fascinating here, if we try to synthesize this whole journey we've been on, it's that the entire psychological architecture we've explored today, right from the moment you consciously, intentionally select a moderately difficult goal, through the experience of flow, the interpretation of stress as fueled, even the slightly tricky mechanism of effort justification. It's all part of this highly efficient, adaptive human system.
A system designed for what, ultimately? It seems designed to convert that feeling of passive external pressure, that internal doubt and anxiety, into undeniable subjective proof of your own personal capability, into agency. Life's passive demands, the ambushes, the unexpected problems, they are unavoidable. That's just part of being alive. But the deliberate, conscious, persistent choice to seek out and pursue difficult, self-imposed, active challenges, that seems to be the core engine for building the self-efficacy, the locus of control, the psychological resilience you absolutely need to meet every single one of those unexpected ambushes head-on. Not as a pinball, but as the player.
So the ultimate psychological victory here, it isn't really about achieving some perfect external result, is it? It's not about actually winning the marathon or getting the flawless promotion or building the perfect piece of furniture. It's more internal than that.
Much more internal.
It sounds like the real win is the internal cultivation of what you call an autotelic personality. Is that right? A disposition, a way of being, rooted in that constant search for flow, for mastery, for growth, just for its own sake.
That's beautifully put.
Because that disposition, that mindset, ensures you're always actively seeking out challenges, always looking for those intrinsically rewarding experiences. It guarantees that yourself, your sense of capability, is perpetually growing, moving towards greater complexity and agency. Rather than just stagnating, or worse, shrinking back into feeling like that pinball, just reacting passively to whatever life throws your way. It makes you the agent, not the object, of your own experience.